moderating this live Q&A webinar today. Here to answer questions, we have Ken Kuchno. We will start with previously asked questions, and then we will take live questions from the audience next. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question box on the bottom right side of your screen. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First question, when will the PDF option to print the application be ready? Is it helpful with reviewing and referencing data that has been input into the system?
We're in the final stage of actually updating the PDF version of the application, so that should be live and ready to go within the next couple of weeks.
Next question, what are the requirements on possible matching funds? Are there any restrictions on funding Internet Services Network facilities?
Matching funds are only required for the 100% grant program. They are 25% of the overall project cost. And Emma, can you repeat the second part of that question?
Yes. Are there any restrictions on funding Internet Services Network facilities?
No, there are no restrictions on funding the facilities that are necessary to provide the broadband service.
Great. My organization is currently in the process of constructing a 300-mile fiber network. Can this grant be used to fund construction that is already in progress? And can the value of the existing network be used as the match for this grant?
Anything that's already been started per the FOA is not eligible for funding. Only construction that has started after you received an offer from RUS is eligible for funding. And existing assets cannot be used to satisfy any matching requirements for the 100% grant. All the matching has to be a cash match.
Next question. My company bit the bullet and took a 100% loan to build out our broadband before all of this money was available. Is it possible to apply for a grant to help pay it back so we are not so far into debt?
No, as I said earlier for the previous question, anything that's already been completed is not eligible to be applied for and receive funding for.
Next question. It would be helpful to know if this funding opportunity allows for public-private partnerships.
It really depends on how you're defining a public-private partnership. Co-applicants are ineligible, so a public company and a private company could not submit a co-application. However, if you wanted to partner in the arrangements on providing the broadband service through service agreements between the entity that actually does apply, then we do encourage that type of public-private partnership.
Next question. In the service area mapping tool, the census window with population statistics says my coverage area has 100% households without sufficient broadband. But when I try to save, I get an error saying at least 90% needs to be without sufficient broadband before saving. What do I do?
To start with, you have to understand that nothing in the service area mapping tool identifies areas that do not have 10-1 service. The areas that are identified in there are really areas that are ineligible for funding. You're getting an error because what you really need to do on your overall polygon defining your service area is identify what 90% of that service, 90% of the households in that service area do not have sufficient access with broadband. Once you draw that polygon on top of polygon, then you should be able to submit the application.
Great. Next question. If an applicant asks for a large amount, for example, $50 million in a 50-50 application, might RUS award it at a lower amount, or is it all or nothing? And if the latter, should an applicant take this into account in deciding how much to ask for?
An applicant should always take into account deciding how much to ask for. It's a business decision that they have to make. If you requested $50 million, we would look at the application in its entirety and determine whether the application meets the eligibility requirements and is financially and technically sound. We would not carve out a part of the application and only offer part of the request. It is really all or nothing.
Next question. Regarding the financial tab, we have purchased a number of fleet vehicles utilizing manufacturers' financing offers. Do we need to list each of these individually, or can we group them all together as one line item in the debt detail?
You can include them as one line item in the debt detail, but your assumption should clearly explain that this is for numerous vehicles and that's how you're inputting it in there. If you wanted to list each one individually, that's fine, but if you list it as an aggregate, as long as you explain it in the assumptions, that would be acceptable.
For the documents, do we need to upload the individual financing agreements for each vehicle?
For vehicles, you do not need to. If you have other kind of arrangements where the services are much more significant, then you need to, but for vehicles, you do not need to submit each one of them.
Great. Next question. Can you connect us with an experienced grant writer who would work pro bono or on a fee basis to help pull our application together by the deadline?
On that one, we do not identify grant writers. There are a number of grant writers out there, but it's really up to the applicants to find those. We don't endorse them or not endorse them. It's up to each applicant to find the grant writer that works best for them.
Next question. Can multiple bore start end XYs be submitted for a given route?
Yeah, this question seems to be getting into the environmental section where we're drawing the routes. So what you really need to do is go in and draw your routes, and then in the description, provide adequate description on what that route really consists of.
All right, next question. Can a nonprofit homeowners association, in making an application for a 100% grant, partner or work with a broadband supplier such as CenturyLink or Verizon for technical expertise?
It would be possible to enter into that type of arrangement, keeping in mind if the homeowner association is the applicant, then the homeowner association has to support the award all on the financial, technical, environmental, and all other sides. Through operating agreements, you can work with other service providers to help operate and maintain the system.
Next question. When will money be awarded, and what is the process if awarded?
Right now, it's hard to predict the exact time frame on when we will get through the review of the applications. A lot of that will be dependent on exactly how many applications are submitted. At this point, we're probably looking at starting to make announcements in late August, early September, maybe a little bit earlier than that. The way the process will work is that if you're lucky enough to make it through the process, and then we will send out an offer letter and explain the terms. At that point, an applicant can decide to accept the award. If they accept the award, we then will obligate the award, and then a period of time after that, we will follow up with closing documents that need to be executed to legally enter into the arrangements with RUS.
Great. Next question. What types of documentation are required to satisfy the real property question?
Real property question just needs a meet and bounds description of the property that you have submitted for each piece of property, and that'll give us sufficient information to include in the security arrangements and mortgage that will come out as part of the closing documents.
Great. And the second part of this question, would you be able to provide more clarification on eligibility of types of middle mile projects?
To start with, standalone middle mile projects are ineligible. So if you're looking at a standalone middle mile project, then it will not fit into the requirements of the program. If the middle mile is needed to support the last mile and provide service to the household and businesses in the PFSA, then we can fund the middle mile facilities that are located in the PFSA, as well as any that are located outside the PFSA to get to a POP to bring the internet service into the company.
Next question. The application guide and the FAQs both state 2019 audited financials are required. What should an applicant submit if their 2019 audited financials are not available at this time?
If you do not have the audited 2019 available, then we will accept the audited 2018 and a copy of the engagement letter to the CPA to enter into the 2019 audit.
For a round one ReConnect recipient of 100% grant funding, does the awardee need to indicate the award in a round two application? And if, what all would need to be included?
The awardee would need to indicate that they got the round one, and in the appropriate places they would need to spell out, when that construction is going to be getting done, when the subscribers are going to be connected, so that all of that round one and anything in round two match up to the financial statement and the construction parts of the application. But it is important that you indicate, that you got a round one and fill in all the appropriate information so that we can analyze, revenues and expenses based on all the proposed subscribers in that round one application.
Is there a minimum amount you can apply for on the 100% grant product?
I don't have the FOA in front of me, but I don't believe that there is a minimum amount. The maximum amount is obviously $25 million. Keeping in mind that it's almost not worth it to put this application together for a very small amount, simply because this is a lot of work and resources required to complete an application.
Do applicants have to obtain letters from farms in addition to the RUS validation via the 2017 Agriculture Census Review?
In round one, we did ask that we got the pre-subscription forms from the farms, but here in round two, we've elected to go with the 2017 Ag Census information, so you do not need to submit those letters of support. When you draw your polygon, the number of farms in an area will automatically be counted, and then we will divide that by 10 and automatically generate the associated score.
In a similar vein to that question, do applicants need to obtain letters of intent from healthcare, education, and/or essential community facilities or opportunity zones, or will such facilities be counted and evaluated using the map data only?
It will be counted using the map data only, and we realize that none of these layers are perfect, and you may have some facilities that you think should be counted, but we are going by the locations that are identified in the different census layers.
Do households include business and residential, or just residential?
When we reference household, we are literally talking about the household. We're not talking about businesses. So it would be just on the residential side where you see households. Where you see the word premise, then that would include all businesses and residents in a proposed service area.
Our local phone company got CAF II funds covering a large portion of town, but the speeds we are experiencing are generally much lower than 10.1. Some people have been told by the company that they cannot get DSL at all. What are the restrictions on including parts of a town that, despite CAF II, are being woefully underserved?
To start with, understand there are different phases of CAF and CAF II. For the ReConnect program, areas that received the CAF II 903 auction award are only eligible to the entities that received that. But if you're talking about just a earlier CAF II award that might have went to something like Verizon and AT&T or Frontier, as long as there's not 10.1 service in those areas can still be applied for to receive ReConnect funding.
Is a legal opinion required for each state in which we operate, or only within the states where funds are requested?
It's only in the states where funds are requested, and we ask that the attorney in question be licensed in at least one of those states.
Are only published depreciation rates by states required to be downloaded, or are you requesting individually approved depreciation rates within a state?
If you are in a state where the Public Utility Commission, Public Service Commission approves the rates, then we ask that you use those rates and submit those rates. But a lot of states do not regulate those rates, so there we just ask you to use the depreciation rates that you currently are using in your operation.
Are all construction wages subject to Davis-Bacon rules?
No, in our Broadband Initiative program back in 2009 and 2010, Davis-Bacon was a factor, but for ReConnect, Davis-Bacon is not a factor. So no, the wages do not require that we apply Davis-Bacon rules to them.
If our application says that we will cover 1,000 residences, but after years of building, we find that we can only cover 950, do we rescind 5% of the proceeds?
We would have to work with an applicant that falls into that situation. To start with, we are looking that if an applicant proposes a service territory and draws that service territory, that you would build out to every premise in that service territory. Now, with that said, there's a 5-year construction period. Things happen within those 5 years. So if something extenuating circumstances came up where you couldn't meet the 100% build out, then we would work with you to determine exactly what that means. In some instances, it may be that a portion of the funds have to be returned.
Will there be another round of ReConnect funding?
Right now, that question is open. You know, today we have plenty of funding. We don't have it all on the table in this round now, but if we were to receive sufficient applications to use up the funding that we have here, there might not be another round unless we received additional funding. It does look like some additional funding may be coming our way based on the President's budget that was recently released, but any additional funding for any given fiscal year for the government is dependent on appropriation laws, appropriations being passed for the program. Right now, it looks like there may be some kind of next round after this one, but I just can't guarantee or say what that might be at this point.
May we share this webinar information with tribes?
Yeah, we are looking to get this posted within the next few weeks. So, you know, once we get it up there, you know, anybody's free to share it with anybody else. It's public information at that point.
Great. So we are finished with our pre-submitted questions, and we will now transition to the live Q&A portion of the webinar. Please give us a moment while we pull up your questions. All right. If we plan the project to complete in 2 years and it ends up taking us all 5 years, is that an issue?
It's only an issue in the case that financials of the applicant may be impacted by it. So I can't answer that directly without having more information. But in general, if it takes longer than you originally anticipated, as long as the company stays financially healthy, we will work with you on getting it done. But understand that there is a 5-year construction period, and at the end of that 5 years, all construction has to be completed.
Is a not-for-profit considered a business?
I would really have to understand more about what that not-for-profit does. There's all kind of different flavors out there. So if the person that asked that question can drop something in and it goes to the bottom of the queue, sorry to say, but, you know, we'll try to get to it and give you a better answer. But I really need to know a little bit more about what that not-for-profit does. It could be a business, but in some cases it may not be a business.
Do you have to go step by step in the application, or can you move ahead?
We recommend that you go step by step through the application from left to right, if you will. You can move around and work on different sections at different times without going down that order, but please understand that there are a lot of interdependencies on the different sections. So if you're jumping ahead, something that you put in section, I'll just make up some names. If you put it in section F, could affect section A if you'd already completed that. So, you know, you always want to do one final check across the board that all your numbers are the way that they are supposed to be, but you can move around in the application.
How many years of historical financial statements are required from the applicant?
No, we ask for 4, but at a minimum we need to have at least 2 years of historical financials.
We have an existing ARR and the RepSign cert from round 1. The account we created in round 1 still exists. How can the RepSign cert create a second account for a different company in round 2?
For a different company in round 2, to create a separate one, you would need a different email address. If you're using the same email address, you won't be able to create another one. So otherwise, you know, if you're going in for another company and you're using that company's email addresses, then it would be the same process that you used the first time around.
If a central office is inside of an ineligible zone, can the necessary fiber coming out of the central office still be funded?
As long as the fiber facilities are needed to provide service in an eligible service area. If that fiber coming out of the CO is used for both non-funded service area and a proposed funded service area, then you would have to prorate that accordingly and split the cost between the different service areas.
Would a round 1 applicant who is applying for round 2 need a funding request resolution, given that our first resolution authorized awards of $25 million? We do not expect our combined round 1 and round 2 applications to exceed this amount.
We would need a second resolution. The round 1 one was specific to the round 1 application, so we would ask that the board authorize the submission of a second application in round 2.
Great. When I get to start the application, why does it mention that my computer may be subject to seizure because the data is being transmitted over the USDA's network?
Guys, you got me on that one because to my knowledge, I don't have that kind of statement anywhere, so I'm not sure where that's being picked up at. If the person that's asking that question can identify where they're reading it and what document, I'd be glad to track it down for you. But to my knowledge, that statement is not included in any of the ReConnect language.
Are counties eligible for grants?
As long as the county has no laws or regulations in place to stop it, counties can submit for a grant. Understand that the county will be on the hook to complete everything, and they need to be ready for that.
What if we are a startup with no 2018 or 2019 financials?
The way then, according to the requirements of the FOA, if you do not have those financials available, then you are not eligible to apply.
Where would you input an overall strategic plan for deploying broadband capabilities within a city or county in the application, as the executive summary is focused on proposed project and workforce and organization?
Considering the size of the executive summary in the application itself, I would just include an attachment in those project document section that would fully explain that. You can submit that kind of information there.
Working with landowners on gaining building and cabinet easements and land. If a cabinet site falls slightly out of our proposed grant approved location but on the same parcel, do we have to resubmit environmentals for that site?
Environmental information has to be included for the entire site, whether inside or outside a proposed funded service area. So, initially as you're putting the application together, you should include all the site, no matter where it is located.
Is a church considered a business?
God, I'll have to get back on that one. I need to re-educate myself on the definition of a business and see how it applies to the church. I would look at our definition in the definition sections of the FOA, and if a church meets those requirements, then it can be counted. If it doesn't meet those requirements, it won't be counted. But again, that we have to go back to the definition.
If applicants did not apply for round 1, can they apply for round 2?
Sure, applicants can apply for round 2. There was no requirement that they had to apply for round 1. And looking at, who's starting applications and submitting new ARR requests, there are a lot of people in round that received round 1 that are reapplying. There are a lot of applicants that didn't receive a round 1 that are reapplying, and we have a whole bunch of new applicants applying.
We've answered a similar question a few times, but just to reiterate, because we're getting it again, we're a new company and only have 1 year of financials. We do have our audited financial for 2019, but nothing for 2018. Does that disqualify us?
If the 2019 is a comparative audit, and we understand that would be really tough on without having operations in 2018, but that would be something you'd have to work with your CPA to meet the requirements for.
If a wireless solution is being proposed, can service areas spill into areas not part of the application, recognizing that those areas can't be counted as part of the evaluation and scoring process?
Yeah, guys, we will take a look at the proposed engineering of the system. Obviously, fringe areas on a wireless system may stretch into an ineligible area, and we'll take that into account. But if we can tell that wireless tower and access point is covering an entire large area of that is not eligible for funding, then that will come into question whether we can allow that or not. Again, we would have to look at the overall engineering design to make that full determination.
We have a multitude of census blocks that will become part of our PFSA. These census blocks are not connected or contiguous. We would like to connect all of these census blocks within thin pathways approximately the size of the right-of-way through NFSA areas to create a large single PFSA. We understand these pathways will be considered part of the PFSA. Is the applicant required to serve all households in the census blocks that these thin pathways cross, even though the census blocks would be considered NFSAs?
One, I would recommend that you do not try to draw those thin pathways. That can cause issues in our review and analysis of the application. The system will allow you to draw those pathways. Any premise located in those pathways must be proposed to have service, and at the end of the day must receive service, or you will not be fulfilling the requirements of your grant. If those thin pathways actually go through an ineligible area, then that PFSA will be ineligible. So again, I do not recommend that you draw those thin pathways. That is not how we designed the system. I understand, putting in information for one service area versus putting them in for 5 different service areas is a bit more work, but that will allow us to do a much better evaluation, and also I think will give you a better opportunity of being eligible.
When defining an NFSA, is the applicant required to serve all homes in an NFSA census block?
When you're in an NFSA, it's really up to you as to what you're proposing, keeping in mind that we will look at, facilities that you may need to construct and fund outside of the award in an NFSA, and we will look at how you're counting households and customers in that NFSA through the financial projections, and they really need to match up. So, a lot of it just depends on how you've structured your business plan, but there is no technical requirement that 100% of the households in an NFSA would be served, although I'm not sure why you would be expanding an NFSA to parts of a service area that you do not plan on serving.
Have there been any changes in the deadline for filing?
Right now, the deadline for filing is still March 16th.
If a prior BIP awardee received partial grant and partial loan BIP funding, can that awardee apply for the ReConnect grant funding?
They can apply for the ReConnect grant funding as long as they have not taken out the loan component and they're still working on paying the principal down out of that. If this was an applicant that substituted equity or cash reserves for the loan component and only received a 100% grant, then they could only apply for a loan.
If the chairman of the board is also an employee, like the CEO, can the chairman sign the funding request resolution? Yeah,
who signs the resolution and the request is really up to the bylaws of the company or the organizational documents of the company. So that I would refer you back to how your organization is legally established and set up.
If an applicant is a county and there are other projects being proposed in contiguous or overlapping areas, how is eligibility determined? Which applicant would be favored?
Emily, you want to read that one again?
Yeah.
Emily, sorry.
If an applicant is a county and there are other projects being proposed in contiguous or overlapping areas, okay, how is eligibility determined?
Well, one, eligibility, we look at each application individually. If we have multiple applications proposing to serve the same areas, then we would look at, first we would go to scoring, and then we would look at, what each one of those applications is truly proposing to do. And, if we are exactly in the same areas, then we would have to take a look at where this is falling out in the scheme of things. Obviously, we're only going to make one award, so it really would come down to, what applicant is proposing the best service for the customers out there. So if you're aware of competing applicants, then, you probably want to put some extra effort into identifying how your application is going to support the area in question.
Is the RUS Form 87 required as part of the application uploads, and is it required for 100% grants?
It's not required as part of the uploads. It will be required as part of the closing document. That form actually identifies who is responsible for certain things like advance requests and different items as we go through the servicing of it, but the Form 87 is not required as part of the application.
In the service offering section of the application, it asks what kind of service are you offering. We deliver video and data, and we can deliver voice. Therefore, do we check the box that the service is voice, video, or data?
You would whatever service you're providing, you would check that box, keeping in mind that we have to have data service being provided. Data service has to be provided in the proposed service area. The other services are just ancillary, and we're just looking for the monthly rates to calculate, what the proposed revenues would be for the service area, for the local services. And
we have someone asking the same question again, still not clear. If we were a business if we are not a business in 2018 and only have financials for 2019, are we still eligible?
The requirement is that a comparative audit be submitted, guys, and every state's a little bit different, so I would work with your CPA and ask him, you know, is this a comparative audit if I only have 1 year of information in there? Comparative audits are usually 2 years of information. A lot of it will depend on, you know, when did the operation really get started, and can a comparative audit be completed by the CPA?
If an applicant has selected EA or EIS as a selected compliance method, consultation with RUS is required. How do we get a consultation set up with RUS?
I believe that, you know, there's contact information in the application, but you would immediately reach out to RUS and ask for the consultation, keeping in mind that if you are in an EA or EIS situation, you probably need to be well along the way of getting that completed. Those are long, drawn-out processes. So, you know, that would need to be done in front of, you know, the application being submitted or well along the way. So if you fall in that category, I would immediately reach out to RUS, and we can connect you up with some of our environmental specialists.
This is similar to a question we received earlier, but to reiterate, can a cabinet or building seating a funded area be placed in a non-funded area? Yeah,
facilities can be located in a non-funded area as long as that facility is providing service to the proposed funded service area. If that facility is a combination of proposed funded and non-funded, then it'll have to be rated it'll have to be prorated accordingly.
We have the following from ReConnect Round 1, the State Broadband Office certification of no duplicate funding and letters from the Governor's Office certifying that we have a broadband plan, as well as no restrictions of right-of-way and expediting easements. Do we need to obtain new letters for Round 2?
For Round 2, as long as, I mean, the requirement was that, you know, the letters had to be within the last 5 years. As long as the Round 1 information has not exceeded that 5 years, then you can resubmit that same information in the Round 2 application.
In the CIW, please explain the difference between outside plant conduit system and outside plant duct asset types.
God, I'll have to take a look at that. To me, that's the same facility. A duct is a conduit. I mean, there are differences in that, you know, generally a duct system, it can be much bigger than a conduit, but they're essentially the same thing.
Is it okay to use thin lines going down road center lines, which represent our middle mile fiber on the map that we upload of our non-funded existing service areas to make it contiguous?
If that middle mile is just providing service to the funded service area, then, you know, you really, that would be a common facility, and I would put that in the common facility section of the application.
Will RUS provide guarantee for outside funding?
We can share our lien arrangements with outside funding, but you would need to fully explain that in the application, and you would need to include a letter from the other financial institution indicating that they are willing to enter into a shared security arrangement with RUS.
So I thought that ReConnect was for residences only. Why are we talking about businesses and churches?
ReConnect is to provide broadband service into a proposed funded service area. In that proposed funded service area, you're going to have a lot of different anchor institutions, businesses, and residents. You know, we build a lot of things around the households for eligibility, but when we go into an area, it's a much better business plan to serve all the facilities that are in the proposed funded service area.
All right. Follow-up question regarding the second account creation requiring a second email account for the RepSign cert. Does this mean that the RepSign cert needs to apply for a second Level 2 EOF account using a different email than in the existing Level 2 EOF account?
If it's for a different company, they need to provide a separate, they need to submit a second request for that second company.
All right, great. On the Round 1 award, what time period is expected when responding to environmental question responses?
A lot of that depends on where you were at the time of submitting your application. I believe we now have notified all the round one awardees, if you will, of where they fall in their completing their environmental requirements. So I would refer you back to that letter to get more specific. Some of it is a few months. Some of it can be quite a while, and you can have a significant amount of time to finish the requirements. But I would refer back to the letters they were literally just sent at the end of last week, early this week. So if you haven't seen it, I would check your mail to see what you might have gotten recently.
Regarding the performance of offered service, the 20 points, does this mean that you need to be able to deliver 100 megabits per second simultaneously to every premise, or 100% of those who want it, recognizing that there may only be a few at any given time who want it?
To get the points, you have to demonstrate that the system is capable of delivering 100 service to every premise in the proposed funded service area, essentially at the same time. We understand that, bringing in the backbone facilities, you're not going to spend that level of funds on bringing in backbone for everybody at the same time, but you have to demonstrate that the system is capable of delivering that, and that the backbone facilities would essentially, with today's technology, almost have to be fiber to provide that.
As a follow-up, if the network is capable, but there are some customers on the edge of the service area that cannot get it currently, but the company commits to building to serve them if they want it, does that comply?
I'm not fully understanding the question, because if to be eligible, essentially all of the households would not be able to receive that service today. So if you're drawing a proposed funded service area, then all the premises, households, and businesses in that service area would have to be capable of receiving the 100 service.
Can projects be funded in multiple U.S. markets?
We can have individual PFSAs that are located in different jurisdictions, even in different states. Technically, you could have a PFSA in California and a PFSA in Pennsylvania, understanding the logistical and financial requirements for doing that. And you would need to fully explain and support, how you're going to accomplish that.
It is understood that the grant will fund capital spent to provide service in a PFSA. However, the links that connect PFSAs also have capital costs. Can you clarify how USDA wants us to allocate the cost of shared facilities and equipment?
Shared facilities should go into the common network equipment category inside the CIW, and that's where that should be listed and explained.
How do you determine the amount of funding? Is it by number of homes passed, or is there a formula?
There's no specific formula, guys. Each applicant needs to take a look at what kind of technology they're proposing. Estimate, if you're looking at fiber, estimate how many miles of fiber you need, how many fiber terminals, how many ONTs, how many NIDs, and work with coming up with a cost estimate for each one of those. We have general ranges that we look at, but that changes constantly. So, we just need to be in the ballpark, but there is no set formula for calculating that. You really have to do a high-level design that gives you sufficient information for estimating those costs.
For new applicants submitting their access requests, how do we specify the utilization of contractors and consultants, and assigning those roles of those contractors in preparing the application?
Where you go in to do your AR certification, you can add consultants there as to who can work on your application. So you would have to add them as a consultant in the AR process or after the AR process, and identify who can have access to your application.
When the PDF of the application is available, where will it be posted?
The PDF won't be posted per se. At the end of the application process, there's a summary and submit button. When you click that button, it will open up and then ask you if you want to print a PDF. Great.
And we answered a similar question earlier, but it's being asked again. So again, if a prior BIP awardee received partial grant and partial loan funding, can that BIP awardee apply for the ReConnect grant funding?
Read that again.
If a prior BIP awardee received partial grant and partial loan funding, can that BIP awardee apply for ReConnect grant funding?
If they received a partial loan and partial grant, as long as they didn't take out the grant component in the beginning, then they would be eligible to apply for a grant again.
Right. Okay, and we've been told to slow down a little bit, so give us one moment. All right. Again, if you see that submit or ask a question button in the bottom right hand of your screen, please submit a question. We will move to a few frequently asked questions while we're waiting for some more questions to come in. Does the funding opportunity announcement published in 2019 differ from the one published in 2018?
There are some basic requirements that have changed. Essentially, most of it's the same. Financial and engineering is the same. There was a couple of the scoring criteria and maybe one or two of the eligibility requirements that changed. So, I would I wouldn't tell you to rely on the FOA 1. I would tell you to rely on FOA 2.
Great. Does the applicant need to obtain new business subscription forms if they already submitted signed 2019 forms in round 1?
You would need to get new forms simply because businesses come and go, and we need to make sure that the business is still in existence.
All right. What counts as an essential community facility?
Essential community facilities are identified on the GIS layer in the mapping tool, so that is really where to go to find out, what the essential community facilities are in your proposed service territory. That is a calculation that's automatically done once you draw your service area.
Is the entire blank application available anywhere to review?
No, you have to go online, unfortunately, right now. We're working on that for future rounds if we have them, but today you can only access the application itself online.
Right, and we've gotten this question a couple times as well, but to repeat, is a second ARR required if we still have access to the application system from a round 1 application?
But ask this.
Is a second ARR required if we still have access to the application system from a round 1 application?
If it's the same company, then you can use your existing ARR.
What projection do we create our maps on for submission?
I'm not really understanding that question. You would draw your proposed funded service area in the mapping tool. So if that's not the answer you was looking for, then please try to clarify that question for us.
What data is used to calculate the rurality of proposed funded service areas?
The rurality of the proposed funded service area, there's 2 calculations in the round 2. One, we look at, are you 100 miles from a city or town, or we would take the total proposed households in the service area, and look at the amount of square miles, and then divide it and turn it into a square mile, subscribers per square mile projection.
Is there a limit on the number of applications an entity may submit?
An entity may only submit a single application in this round. They can work on multiple applications. For instance, if they weren't sure whether they wanted to do 100% grant or a 50-50, they can start both of those applications, but once an application is submitted, then that person will be stopped from submitting a second application.
A clarification for drawing the maps. I was told that we could drag and drop shape files into the map. What projection do we create those shape files on? NAD 83, Mercator 84?
Guys, I can take that one back. I don't know that you drag and drop. I know you can import a shape file into the mapping tool, but I don't know that it's a drag and drop, and I'm personally not familiar with all of the GIS technical requirements. So that one I would ask you, and I really hate doing this, I would ask you to put it into the Contact Us question portal so that I can get technical people to give you the right answer on that question.
Where is the application located online, and can it be downloaded?
It cannot be downloaded. If you go to reconnect.usda.gov, you will see buttons that will take you to the application.
Can Round 1 awardees submit an application for a different PFSA?
Yes, Round 1 awardees can submit an application for different PFSAs. But keep in mind, you need to spell out that you got the Round 1 and take it into account in all the sections of the application.
In regards to RUS Form 87, we're an electric cooperative. Do we use senior staff to populate that form, or our board of directors?
I think I don't have it in front of me, guys, but I believe it's a combination of board of directors and senior staff, depending on who's doing what function for you.
All right, give us one moment. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar and asking those great questions. To stay up to date on all ReConnect events, please subscribe to the ReConnect events page. Our final workshop will be held tomorrow and Thursday in Arlington, Virginia, and we'll be holding more webinars like this one throughout the application window as well, including an environmental overview on March 2nd and another live Q&A webinar on March 4th. If we didn't get to your question today, please submit it through the Contact Us button on the ReConnect website as well at reconnect.usda.gov. Thank you so much.